When this shooting happened in Uvalde, Mark, you were the first person I thought about, you and Jackie and the kids, and honestly, all the Sandy Hook families, because I could only imagine how this makes you relive the horror and the heartbreak of that day. Can you tell us how you were able to process this latest news out of Texas?
When we heard the news coming out of Uvalde, when that was first breaking, we were still in the process of wrapping our heads around the fact that innocent grocery shoppers had been gunned down and shot to death because they were Black. And we were still just trying to comprehend that atrocity when we heard the news from Uvalde. And the first thing, Katie, I remember hearing was, and it took me right to that moment when I started getting text messages and emails and phone calls on December 14th, 2012, saying, did you hear the news? There's a lockdown and maybe a shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary. And those words just didn't sound like wasn't making any sense to me. And last Tuesday, when we heard there was a shooting in an elementary school, it was the same thing, like, oh my God. And I'll share this with you, Katie, that that Tuesday night, as the news was becoming more detailed and the similarities to Sandy Hook were uncanny, Jackie turned to me and said, this is their Friday night. And I knew exactly what she meant. The shooting at Sandy Hook happened on a Friday morning, which took us right back to our own experience that night when James and Natalie had been taken to neighbors for the day and had to be brought home. And we had to walk them upstairs to our bedroom and sit them down on the bed and tell them what happened. And I will tell you that nobody should ever have to do that. And our hearts were literally breaking thinking of those families having to do that night. And then the next day having to wake up and wake up from a tumultuous night of nightmares and realize again that this wasn't a dream or a nightmare, that this is real.
Mark, I'll never forget talking to you and your family just 2 days after you had lost 7-year-old Daniel, and sitting in your living room near your Christmas tree. You were all still in a state of shock. Little James, tears just streaming down his face.
In one word, Daniel was a light. And when I tell you, when he was 4 years old, he was selected to be part of a program where he was paired up with special needs children in a preschool environment. And he was selected for that because his personality was perfect for that.
How are you all doing now, almost 10 years later?
It is a continuing journey, and for folks who think this was something terrible that happened to us 10 years ago, it is always with us. It will always be with us. We talk about our little Daniel just about every day, and we miss him every minute of every day. We want to kind of find the balance between, not dwelling on it and finding a healthy place to be with it. But James and Natalie are both thriving in college and pursuing music, both of them. And Jackie and I are just continually supporting each other and just being open, honest, and loving with each other, and being the best parents, being the best spouses we can, and continuing this day-by-day process.
Sandy Hook Promise really has focused on recognizing, Mark, the warning signs. And you have been effective in a number of cases, haven't you?
When this first happened, I recognized early on that I had to be involved in this. I owed it to Daniel. I still owe it to Daniel. I owe it to James and Natalie to try to fix this and to prevent other families from having to endure this life of pain, especially when we know it's preventable. And so we were, in the early days, all we knew what to do was to try to help our government do anything that they could do. And at that time was the Manchin-Toomey background check bill. And it was just about closing the loophole in existing law. And I thought that would be an easy one, especially because we had the support of 90% of the American people, and unconscionably that did not pass. And the fact that legislation did not pass, despite the will of the American people, caused us to rethink this model and see what else can we do. And we did a lot of research. And one of the things that kept emerging was that every one of these mass casualty events, every one of these mass shootings, every school shooting, every shooting in a public place, almost all of the suicides that we were seeing, there were warning signs in advance. And imagine a world where everyone, instead of saying, oh yeah, we probably should have seen this coming because there were a long history of warning signs. If we think of those warning signs as an opportunity to intervene and connect that individual to help before it becomes a tragedy, we could have a serious impact on this. And so that's where we focus a lot of our work, is training students how to recognize and identify those warning signs, and then giving them the training and the tools to take the next step, to tell a trusted adult, or to use our anonymous reporting system and talk to a crisis counselor and get that individual connected to whatever services they might need to move them through that crisis to a safer, healthier place before it becomes a tragedy. And so to date, we can speak to, that we know of, that were a direct result of middle and high school students who are trained in our Know the Science programs. We have prevented at least 9 school shootings that were planned, that were imminent, where there were arrests made in the aftermath of a tragedy that did not happen.
I'm curious about the strides or lack thereof that have been made in terms of reducing gun violence. There have been some small victories. Can we talk about those, Mark?
We have made progress at local and state levels. The federal government is certainly lagging in their ability to get anything done. Somebody once told me that the states will be the vanguard of change. And you could interpret that as to the populace will also be the vanguard of change. But enough people are talking loudly enough about this and demanding change, the policy will have to follow. And President Biden just signed our Stand Up Act into law that we wrote, passed with bipartisan support, which will provide suicide awareness training and prevention to middle and high school students across the country. So we're very proud of some of the successes that we've had, and some of the milestones and the amazing advocacy of so many of the other national and local gun violence prevention groups is a force to be reckoned with.
Do you think there should be an assault weapons ban, Mark, and a buyback program? And what other measures? I know that this is not what Sandy Hook Promises is necessarily focused on, but you're very knowledgeable when it comes to reducing gun violence. What else needs to be done?
With regard to your assault weapons question, Katie, a lot of folks try to rebrand that as a modern sporting rifle, and unfortunately, and to my own horror, we did some research on that, and because I wanted to learn, is it just a scary looking weapon that's still innocuous or not as dangerous as others? And we learned that there are physical components to the AR platform, because it was designed for military use on the battlefield. And I've spoken to members of the military and law enforcement about this. I can share with you that somebody I know very closely trained sharpshooters for the Marines and snipers, and they said they prefer the semi-automatic platform over fully automatic because they could be more deliberate and more accurate and kill lots of people very quickly. And that's the kind of firepower that is reflected in this civilian version, which is just about the same. But one of the things that I learned is that because of the velocity of that .223 round that comes out of that barrel, it's traveling at about 4,000 feet per second. And what happens is there's a physical phenomenon where the speed of that object through the air compresses the air molecules and creates a shock wave. And that shock wave, when it encounters soft tissue and even bone, is tremendously destructive, more than the actual projectile. And I can't tell you what it does to me to know that that's what happened to my sweet little boy. But to folks who say it just looks scary, that's nonsense. It's actually more lethal because of that shock wave. And I can't find a practical application in civilized society for that. But to your question about what else can we do, there is so much that we can do. I heard Vice President Harris the other day say, this is not like we're searching for a vaccine. We already have the antidote. We already have solutions available to us. So closing the loophole in the federal background check system, making that universal, truly universal. We have evidence and research that informs us that will save lives. And maybe it wouldn't have prevented shootings that have already happened, but we can prevent shootings that haven't happened yet. Extreme risk protection orders, also known as red flag laws, are proven effective, save lives, and don't infringe on anybody's Second Amendment rights. Secure storage, so important. You know, the deaths that happen every day by students, students, but by youth that shouldn't have access to firearms in the home, suicides. We need to make that the law of the land, just so it sends a message that this is important. If you already identify as a responsible gun owner, you should already be doing that. It shouldn't be an impact on you. So those are some of the gun safety policy initiatives that are available to us, that are constitutional, that don't infringe on anybody's right, any eligible people to purchase a firearm. And then, you know, community-based violence intervention programs are proven effective as well. Truly the essence of preventing gun violence before it happens. So there are a lot of solutions available to us that I wish we could get up and running at the federal level now.
How do you keep going? How do you not just disengage, Mark?
It's really hard, and I'll just say that it's really hard, and it can be so discouraging that I literally pour my heart and soul and everything I have into this around the clock. I'll just say around the clock, and with every fiber of my being, and it's going on 10 years now. And to see these horrible atrocities and these families being torn apart by preventable gun violence on seemingly every day. Well, definitely every day. I mean, on top of the mass shootings that are reported in the news, there's a daily drumbeat of gun violence taking lives in our cities and towns across this country every day. It's hard to keep going. But then, you know, I tell myself I'm doing this to honor my little Daniel, and to protect James and Natalie, and to save other families from having to endure this pain. And when I think of it like that, and when I know that we have solutions, and I know we have something that works, I know we can stop this, I can't give up. I don't have an option anymore, Katie. I can't just say, this is too hard, I have to stop. It's not an option for me.